Hello. Today I want to talk about equivalent fractions. Equivalent, this word, we use this symbol to show this word. Equivalent means the same as. So the same as is what equivalent means. Earlier, we had been talking about fractions that were equivalent to 1/2. And we said, well, anytime that you have the numerator is half of the denominator, that is equivalent or the same as 1/2. So if I have 1/2 piece of a pie, it is the same as if that pie was cut into 4 pieces and I had 2 of the 4 pieces. And we certainly can prove that. We can show something cut into half, something else cut into 4 pieces, and if I have 1/2, it's the same as having 2/4. I can also say that if my denominator is 6, an equivalent fraction to 1/2 is 3/6, or 4/8. These are all equivalent fractions to 1/2. So we know how to do this because we know we can take the numerator is half of the denominator, just like 1 is half of 2, 2 is half of 4, 3 is half of 6. These are all equivalent fractions. They all represent the same amount, 1/2. But what if we're not working with 1/2? How do we find equivalent fractions then? So today I want to model 2 ways that you can find equivalent fractions. One is to use fraction strips or a model, and the other is to use multiplication. So I'm going to start with fraction strips first. So for instance, I have an object that is cut into 3 pieces. Each of these represent 1/3. And I'm looking for an equivalent fraction to 1/3. So I can draw a model underneath. I want to know, is 1/3 equivalent to 2/6? So let's draw a model. Now notice that both of my shapes are the same size. And notice they're on top of each other because it allows me to really clearly be able to see how they are similar or the same, not similar, whether they're equivalent or not. So notice how I'm going to divide my next shape into 6. I know this is thirds, and if I multiply 3 times 2, so I take each of these spaces and make 2 out of them, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1/3, this is 1/3. Each of these is worth 1/6. And if I take 2 of these, look at that. 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. What if I have 2/3? 2/3, that is equivalent to 1, 2, 3, 4/6. So you can see by making a model, I can find equivalent fractions. Let's take our same model here, and we had it divided into thirds, and then we had 6ths. And if I put one more line in each space here, I'm going to make 12ths. 6 times 2 is 12, so I'm just taking each space and dividing it into 12ths. So let's take a look here, and let's erase a few of these lines so it's easy to see. So I've got my 1/3, my 1/3. Each of these spaces is divided into 6ths. and then I've got 12ths. And I'm not going to go ahead and write 12ths for each of these, but you can see they're each 12ths. So let's look for some more equivalent fractions. I've got these models here. Well, let's see, what else is equivalent to 1/3? I know 2/6 is equivalent to 1/3. How many 12ths? Well, here I go down. I can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 12ths is the same amount as 2/6 and as 1/3. So making a model really helps. I can identify some equivalent fractions by making a model, making sure my models are the same size. And also notice that my 1/3 mark here, I'm using that same mark to help me divide these evenly. So here's my 1/3 mark and my 1/3 mark, and notice you can just take this mark all the way down. And now I've divided this into 6 and into 12ths from that. So I'm trying to make sure that all my pieces are the same size. One trick is the wrong word, but one thing that happens often for students is that they don't have their models done really carefully, and then it's really hard to tell if something is equivalent or not. But looking here, I can tell all of these are equivalent by making a model. So let's try another one. I'm hoping you have pencil and paper in front of you. If you don't, like all of our other math lessons, please make sure you get that so that you can do this along with me. All right, so let's say I have 1/3 and I want to know how many ninths is equivalent to 1/3. So I'm going to create my shape again, and I'm going to divide it as carefully as I can into thirds. And then I'm going to draw a similar sized shape underneath. And notice I start with thirds, and then I know if I divide each of these thirds into 2 so that there's 3 spaces, this should be 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So each of these spaces is 1/9. So now 1/3 is equal to 1, 2, 3, 3/9. Do you see how I've done that? 2/3, let's see what 2/3 is equivalent to. Here's 2/3. 2/3, let's just make sure I'm stopping at the same spot. 2/3 is equivalent to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/9. So by making a model, I can find equivalent fractions. All right? And if you wanted to draw that yourself, you could to try it out. How about if you draw this one now? Let's draw 2 shapes. And let's divide one shape in half.